where the secrets of the heart are written with ink and sealed with scandal. Welcome to channel, The Countess Chronicles.
You know what nobody tells you about being invisible? It's not the dramatic kind of loneliness you see in movies, where someone's crying alone in the rain with sad music playing. Nah, it's way more subtle and way more cruel than that. It's showing up to the party looking your best, and nobody remembering you were even there. It's speaking in a meeting, and someone else getting credit for your idea 5 minutes later. It's spending 5 years, 5 entire years, watching everyone around you get chosen, get noticed, get loved, while you're just there, existing but not mattering, present but invisible. And here's the conspiracy nobody wants to admit. Society tells you to just be yourself, and the right person will come, but then punishes you with silence and solitude when you actually do it. It's the biggest lie we're all living, and it's destroying people who refuse to perform for attention they don't want from people they don't like. But what if I told you that your invisibility isn't the problem? What if the years you've spent being overlooked, ignored, and passed over weren't wasted time, but necessary preparation? What if every person who didn't see you was actually protecting you from wasting your life with the wrong people? I know that sounds like the thing people say to make you feel better about being lonely, but stick with me, because this story, this fictional tale rooted in real patterns of human behavior, is about to reveal something that'll change how you see your own life. It's about a woman named Amelia, who spent 5 seasons sitting in corners at glittering balls, watching life happen around her, convinced she was broken. And about a duke called Spencer, who looked powerful and perfect on the outside, but was drowning in panic and isolation on the inside. 2 people who shouldn't have found each other. 2 people society had written off for completely different reasons. Until one midnight, one dance, one whispered invitation changed everything. Here's what's wild about their story, and why it matters to you right now. Amelia didn't get noticed when she finally became confident, beautiful, or impressive. She got seen when she'd completely given up trying, when she was at her most exhausted, most resigned, most authentically defeated. And Spencer, the man everyone wanted but nobody understood, didn't fall for the most dazzling woman in the room. He was drawn to the one person who'd stopped performing altogether. This goes against everything we've been taught about attraction, success, and human connection. We're told to be our best selves, to put our best foot forward, to never let them see you sweat. But what if the secret to genuine connection is the exact opposite? What if the key to being truly seen is to stop trying so hard to be visible? Now, I'm going to be straight with you. This isn't one of those feel-good stories where everything magically works out, because the universe rewards good people. Life doesn't work that way, and I won't insult your intelligence by pretending it does. Amelia suffered. She hurt. She spent years wondering if something was fundamentally broken about her. Spencer battled panic attacks and crippling anxiety while maintaining a facade of strength that was slowly killing him inside. This is a story about pain, isolation, and the forbidden truth that sometimes being invisible is the price you pay for refusing to betray yourself. But it's also about what happens when 2 people who've been invisible for different reasons finally see each other. And more importantly, it's about the lessons hidden in their fictional journey. Lessons you can apply today to transform how you navigate your own invisibility, your own struggles, your own search for genuine connection in a world obsessed with performance. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna walk you through their entire story, from Amelia's 5 years of being overlooked to Spencer's midnight ritual of survival. From the moment their eyes met, to the dance that broke all his rules, and all her expectations. And along the way, I'm going to show you exactly how their experiences mirror patterns you're living right now. How their struggles reveal secrets about human connection that nobody's teaching you. How their eventual recognition of each other demonstrates principles you can use, whether you're dating, building a career, or just trying to find your people in a world that seems designed to keep you isolated. This isn't just entertainment, friend. This is a blueprint for understanding why you feel invisible, what it means, and how to transform that invisibility from a curse into something powerful. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that's going to set you free. You're not invisible because you're not enough. You're invisible because you're surrounded by people looking for the wrong things. And once you understand that, really understand it, deep in your bones, everything changes. The question isn't, how do I get people to notice me? The question is, am I showing up in spaces where my kind of real is valued? Amelia spent 5 years in the wrong ballrooms before she met someone who was looking for exactly what she was. And you might be doing the same thing right now, wondering why nobody sees you, when really you just haven't found your Spencer yet. Someone who recognizes your exhaustion because they're exhausted too. Someone who values your silence because they're tired of noise. Someone who sees your resignation not as weakness, but as the quiet strength of refusing to compromise who you are for temporary validation. Ready to discover why being overlooked might be the best thing that ever happened to you? Let's dive into the enigma of Amelia and Spencer and uncover the revelations hidden in their midnight dance. Because by the end of this story, you're gonna see your own invisibility completely differently. And that shift in perspective? That's where your real power lives. Here's the thing about being invisible. It doesn't happen all at once, you know? It's not like you wake up one morning and suddenly nobody sees you. Nah, it's way more cruel than that. It creeps up on you, season after season, party after party, until you're sitting there wondering if you've become a ghost in your own life. Amelia was 18 when she first stepped into that ballroom, all dolled up in her carefully chosen gown, heart pounding with hope and mystery about what the night might bring. She'd practiced her posture in front of the mirror, memorized witty phrases, even rehearsed her smile. And then she spent the entire evening planted next to her mother like a decorative plant, that polite smile frozen on her face while life happened around her. You've felt this, haven't you? Maybe not at a fancy ball, but you know that gut punch feeling. It's like when you prepare an incredible presentation at work. You rehearse until you've got it down pat. You make those slides pop. You dress sharp. You walk into that conference room ready to shine. And then your moment comes, and your boss doesn't even look you in the eye because he's scrolling through his phone. That ache in your chest, that whisper in your head asking, "Do I even exist?" That's the enigma of invisibility right there. It's not about being unseen. It's about being looked through, like you're made of glass. And what's truly twisted is how it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, a secret code you crack too late. The second season rolled around, and Amelia's hope had dimmed but hadn't disappeared yet. She still tried, still showed up, still wore that practiced smile. Third season? She started sneaking a book in her purse, something to occupy her mind during the endless hours of being furniture. By the fourth season, she'd accepted her role as human decoration, arriving already prepared for the conflict between expectation and reality. Fifth season hit different, though. She only went because family obligation demanded it, dragging herself to those ballrooms like a prisoner walking to her cell. Each year added another layer of resignation, another trace of the girl who once believed she mattered. The transformation wasn't dramatic. It was erosive. like water wearing down stone. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and this is going to challenge what you think you know. It wasn't about beauty, not really. You could line up the most gorgeous people in the world, and some would still end up invisible while others commanded every room they entered. The difference? Energy, baby. The other young women at those balls, girls like Victoria Ashford and Beatrice Thornhill, radiated desperation for attention. You could smell it on them like cheap perfume. They performed, they posed, they practically screamed, "Notice me!" with every calculated gesture. Amelia? She radiated resignation, and that's a frequency nobody wants to tune into. The conspiracy of invisibility works like this. When you convince yourself nobody will see you, you literally make yourself disappear. Let me break down this paradox for you with something you can actually use. Think about those people you know who are always chasing validation on social media, posting every meal, every outfit, every thought, practically begging for likes and comments. Now think about that one person who posts maybe once a month, something real and unfiltered, and somehow gets more genuine engagement. That's the difference between desperate visibility and authentic presence. Amelia had given up the desperate performance, but she hadn't yet discovered authentic presence. She was stuck in this prohibited middle ground, neither performing nor being, just existing in this hidden space between trying and surrendering. It's the loneliest place you can be. Trust me on this. The truly messed up part? Invisibility attracts invisibility. When you walk into a room already convinced you won't be seen, your body language shifts, your energy contracts, your very presence shrinks. It's like you're sending out a signal that says, "Don't bother with me." And people receive that signal loud and clear, without even consciously processing it. I've watched this happen countless times. Brilliant, beautiful, worthy people who've been ignored so long they've internalized their own disappearance. They become complicit in their own erasure, writing themselves out of the story before anyone else gets the chance. And the cruel joke is that they blame themselves, thinking there's something fundamentally broken about who they are. But what if I told you that Amelia's 5 years of invisibility weren't wasted time? What if every ignored evening, every overlooked moment, every silent hour sitting in those ballrooms was actually preparing her for something she couldn't see coming? See, when you're invisible, you develop different skills. You become an observer. You crack the codes of human behavior. You see patterns others miss because they're too busy being seen. You learn to distinguish between genuine connection and social performance. You develop a kind of wisdom that only comes from watching life happen while everyone forgets you're in the room. Amelia didn't know it yet, but her invisibility was becoming her superpower, a revelation waiting to explode. And here's where things start to shift, where the silence of those 5 years begins to whisper secrets she never expected. Because invisibility doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see others. Amelia could spot a fake smile from across the ballroom, could sense desperation masquerading as confidence, could identify the difference between people who wanted attention and people who wanted connection. She'd become fluent in the language of loneliness, an expert in recognizing masks because she'd worn so many herself. What she didn't realize yet was that this fluency would allow her to recognize something rare when it finally appeared. Someone else who was just as lost in the crowd as she was. Someone whose invisibility matched her own. Spencer Dunsmore, Duke of Moreland. They called him the Iron Duke. And man, that nickname wasn't about strength. It was about coldness. Rich beyond your wildest imagination, powerful enough to crush careers with a whisper, feared by everyone who knew his name, and completely, utterly isolated from the world around him. Here's the mystery, though. Every single ball, like clockwork, he'd appear at exactly midnight, dance one waltz with some lucky, or unlucky, depending on who you ask, young woman, and then vanish like smoke. One dance, that's it. That's all anyone ever got from him. The conspiratorial whispers followed him everywhere. Why only one? What's he hiding? Is he cursed? People love creating enigmas around things they don't understand. Now, let me tell you a secret that nobody in that glittering society knew. Something that would have shocked them to their core. The Iron Duke, this imposing figure who made grown men nervous and debutantes swoon, had crippling panic attacks. Yeah, you heard that right. Being surrounded by crowds suffocated him, made his chest tight, made the room spin. The noise, the expectations, the eyes constantly watching, judging. It was like being buried alive in silk and champagne. But here's the conflict. His title demanded presence. His position required visibility. You can't be a duke and just disappear from society, right? So Spencer created what I call a survival ritual, a carefully coded system that let him fulfill his obligations without completely falling apart. One dance, just one. That was his limit, his boundary, his lifeline. He'd calculated it perfectly. Enough time to show his face, to maintain appearances, to satisfy the gossips, but not so long that the walls would start closing in. Think about it like this. You know that coworker who's absolutely brilliant at their job, but never shows up to happy hours? That person who bolts from meetings the second they end, who eats lunch alone, who seems distant but produces incredible work. That's not arrogance, friend. That's survival. Sometimes the people who look the strongest on the outside are the ones holding themselves together with sheer willpower on the inside. Spencer was that person, wearing a duke's title like armor while fighting battles nobody could see. The revelation here is going to mess with your head a bit. Every woman at those balls wanted to dance with the Iron Duke, wanted it desperately, schemed for it, prayed for it. But why? Was it because they were attracted to Spencer the man? Nah, they wanted the Duke, the title, the power, the status. Dancing with him was like holding a winning lottery ticket, a golden seal of approval that could change your entire social standing. It was conquest, not connection. And Spencer? He felt that insincerity in every calculated smile, every rehearsed laugh, every strategic flutter of eyelashes. For 5 years straight, he'd danced with dozens of women and felt utterly, completely alone in every single one of those dances. Here's where it gets really twisted. And this is something you need to understand about human nature. Spencer wasn't looking for someone to save him, or fix him, or heal his broken pieces. He'd accepted his condition, built his life around it, made peace with his limitations. What he craved, what kept him showing up to those suffocating ballrooms despite the panic clawing at his throat, was something simpler and yet infinitely more rare. To be seen as a person, not a prize. To have one genuine moment in a world of performances, one real conversation in an ocean of small talk, one honest connection in a society built on masks and manners. That was the forbidden dream he barely admitted to himself. Let me give you something practical here, something you can apply to your own life right now. Look around at the people you know. Really look. That friend who always seems to have it together but never talks about their struggles? That family member who's successful but seems distant? That colleague who's competent but never vulnerable? They're probably fighting battles you can't see, carrying weight you can't imagine. Spencer taught me this. Strength and struggle aren't opposites. They're companions. The strongest people I've ever met weren't the ones who never broke. They were the ones who learned how to function while broken. They built rituals, created boundaries, found ways to survive in a world that wasn't built for their particular kind of pain. The hidden truth about Spencer's midnight appearances was that they were acts of courage, not coldness. Every time he walked into that ballroom, he was facing his worst fear. Every dance was a silent battle against his own nervous system. What looked like arrogance to the outside world, showing up late, dancing once, leaving early, was actually a man, pushing himself to the absolute edge of what he could handle. And nobody knew. Nobody saw. They created stories about his coldness, his pride, his mysterious nature, when really he was just trying to breathe through another night without falling apart. That's the thing about invisible struggles, you know? People fill the silence with assumptions, usually wrong ones. And here's what really haunts me about those 5 years of midnight dances. Spencer kept hoping. Despite everything, despite the panic and the loneliness and the endless parade of women who saw him as a trophy, he kept showing up. Because somewhere deep down, beneath all that iron exterior, there was still a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, one night would be different. That maybe one person would look past the title and see the man drowning beneath it. That maybe someone else out there was just as lost as he was, just as tired of pretending, just as desperate for something real. And that persistent, stubborn hope, that's what separated him from true disappearance. He was invisible in plain sight, waiting for someone who could actually see him. It was a ball like any other, or at least that's how it started. Same glittering chandeliers, same orchestra playing the same waltzes, same faces wearing the same masks of polite society. Amelia had claimed her usual spot in the corner, that invisible pocket of space where wallflowers gathered, watching the dancers spin across the floor like she was observing life through a window instead of living it. She'd stopped hoping for anything different years ago. This was just another evening to endure, another obligation to fulfill before she could escape back to her books and her solitude. The clock struck midnight, and right on schedule, the whispers started. "He's here." The Iron Duke had arrived, and the entire room shifted its energy toward him like plants turning toward the sun. Spencer began his familiar ritual, that carefully choreographed dance of social survival. His eyes scanned the room, looking for his partner for the obligatory waltz, the one dance that would satisfy society's expectations and let him escape. But here's where the mystery deepens, where fate, or chance, or whatever you want to call it, decided to rewrite the script. Something caught his attention, pulled his focus away from the usual parade of eager faces and elaborate gowns. He saw Amelia, not the prettiest girl in the room, not the one trying hardest to be noticed, but the woman in the corner who'd given up trying. And in that moment, something inside him recognized something inside her. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was recognition. For the first time in 5 years of midnight dances, Spencer saw someone who looked exactly how he felt. Like they were surviving, not living. Like they were going through the motions of existence while feeling completely disconnected from it. The revelation hit him like a physical force. Here was someone who understood the weight of invisibility, who knew what it felt like to be present but unseen, to be surrounded by people while drowning in loneliness. Every other woman in that ballroom was performing, projecting, presenting a carefully curated version of themselves. But Amelia, she'd stopped performing. She was just sitting there, exhausted and real and quietly defeated. And somehow, that honesty called to him louder than all the elaborate performances combined. He crossed the ballroom floor, and let me tell you, that walk was something else. Every eye in the room tracked his movement, every conversation paused, every mother's heart raced with hope that he was heading toward their daughter. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rustle of silk and the sharp intake of collective breath. And then he stopped, right in front of Amelia. The shock rippled through the crowd like electricity. Why her? You could practically hear them thinking. She's nobody special. She's been ignored for 5 seasons. What could he possibly see in her? But that was exactly the point, wasn't it? She wasn't performing for him. She wasn't trying to be anything other than what she was. Tired, honest, and completely, refreshingly real. Spencer leaned down and whispered 4 words that changed everything. Just one dance? Now, here's what made that moment so powerful. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. There was no arrogance, no command, no expectation. It was a question, not a demand. An invitation, not an obligation. And there was something else in his voice, something Amelia recognized immediately because she'd heard it in her own thoughts 1,000 times. Vulnerability. He wasn't asking her to dance because she was beautiful or accomplished or connected. He was asking because for some reason she couldn't understand yet. He saw her, actually saw her, not as a potential wife or a social conquest or a decorative accessory, but as a person, as someone who mattered. Let me give you a modern example so you really feel this. Imagine you're having the absolute worst day of your life. You've been rejected, overlooked, made to feel small and insignificant. You're riding the elevator alone, trying not to cry, trying to hold yourself together until you get home where you can fall apart in private. And then someone steps in, a complete stranger, and they look at you, really look at you, and ask, "Are you okay?" Not because they want something from you, not because they're being polite, but because they genuinely see your pain and care about it. That moment when you realize you're not as invisible as you thought, that someone somewhere noticed your struggle and deemed it worthy of attention, that's exactly what happened between Spencer and Amelia. It was recognition of shared humanity in a world that had forgotten they were human. Amelia took his hand, and as they walked to the dance floor, something shifted in the atmosphere. The other guests watched with a mixture of confusion, jealousy, and fascination. Some of the mothers looked offended. Their daughters had been trying for years to catch the Duke's attention, and this nobody had succeeded without even trying. But here's the secret they couldn't understand. Amelia succeeded precisely because she wasn't trying. She hadn't dressed to impress him, hadn't positioned herself strategically, hadn't rehearsed clever things to say. She'd simply existed in her truth. And somehow, against all odds and social logic, that truth had called to him. The conspiracy of connection works in mysterious ways. Sometimes the universe brings people together not when they're at their best, but when they're at their most authentic. The music started, and they began to dance. And in that moment, as Spencer's hand found Amelia's waist and they moved in time to the waltz, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in 5 years of mandatory midnight dances, Spencer didn't feel panic rising in his chest. The room didn't close in. The crowd didn't suffocate him. The noise didn't overwhelm his senses. Because he wasn't dancing with an audience or performing for society or fulfilling an obligation. He was dancing with someone who understood what it meant to feel lost in a crowded room. Someone whose silence matched his own. Someone who, like him, had been waiting without knowing what she was waiting for. And that connection, that unexpected trace of hope in the midst of their shared loneliness, was about to change both of their lives forever. They didn't talk much during that first dance, and honestly, They didn't need to. Words would have been too small, too insufficient to capture what was happening between them. But something shifted the moment they started moving together. Something you could feel even if you couldn't name it. Amelia didn't try to impress him with witty remarks or calculated charm. She just existed in that moment, present and honest, and completely herself. And Spencer, for the first time in what felt like forever, didn't feel that familiar panic creeping up his spine. His chest didn't tighten, his hands didn't shake, the room didn't spin. There was just the music, and her, and this weird sense of peace he'd forgotten could exist. That's the mystery of genuine connection right there. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It whispers itself into existence through comfort. Here's what you need to understand about why they clicked so instantly. And this is going to challenge everything you think you know about attraction and chemistry. It wasn't physical beauty or social status or shared interests that created their bond. It was mutual recognition of brokenness. See, every other person in that ballroom was wearing a mask, performing confidence, projecting success, hiding their fears and insecurities behind elaborate social codes. But Amelia had stopped wearing masks years ago because what was the point? Nobody was looking anyway. And Spencer had never been able to wear masks effectively because his anxiety always leaked through the cracks. So there they were, two people stripped of pretense, dancing in what I call honest silence. No games, no strategies, no hidden agendas. Just two broken people being broken together. The entire ballroom was watching them, and the whispers were getting louder with every turn they made across the floor. Why her? She's not even trying. Look at her dress. It's from 3 seasons ago. She doesn't smile enough. She doesn't sparkle. She's not special. And that, right there, that's exactly why it worked. She wasn't trying to be special, wasn't attempting to sparkle, wasn't forcing smiles she didn't feel. In a world where everyone was competing to be the most dazzling performance, Amelia was the only person being real. And in that sea of manufactured perfection, her authenticity was revolutionary. It was like finding water in a desert of champagne. Sure, champagne looks prettier, but water's what you actually need to survive. Let me give you something you can actually use in your own life, because this principle applies whether you're dating, networking, or just trying to make genuine friends. Think about Instagram for a second. Everybody's posting their highlight reels, their filtered faces, their carefully curated lives designed to generate envy and admiration. And it's exhausting to watch, isn't it? You scroll through all that perfection and feel simultaneously inadequate and disconnected. But then someone posts something real, a photo without filters, a story about their struggles, a moment of genuine vulnerability. And suddenly, you stop scrolling. You engage. You connect. Because authenticity cuts through the noise like nothing else can. That's what happened on that dance floor. Amelia wasn't trying to be perfect, so Spencer could finally stop pretending he needed perfection. The music ended, and according to 5 years of established ritual, Spencer should have bowed, thanked her politely, and disappeared into the night, like he always did. One dance. That was the rule. That was the limit of what he could handle before the walls started closing in. But here's where everything changed, where the codes he'd lived by for so long suddenly didn't apply anymore. He looked at Amelia, saw something in her eyes, maybe understanding, maybe curiosity, maybe just the same loneliness he felt, and heard himself say something he'd never said before. One more? Those 2 words cracked open a door he'd kept locked for years. The revelation wasn't just that he wanted to keep dancing, it was that he could. She made it possible. That one more turned into 2 more, then 3, then 4. The crowd watched in absolute shock as the Iron Duke, the man who'd never danced more than a single waltz with anyone, kept going, kept choosing her, kept defying his own patterns and limitations, and with each dance, something inside him loosened, some tightly wound spring of anxiety began to uncoil. It wasn't that his panic disorder magically disappeared. That's not how mental health works. And I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. But Amelia's presence created a kind of safe space, a bubble where he could exist without performing strength he didn't feel, where he could just be Spencer instead of the Duke, where his struggle wasn't a secret he had to hide, but something that could exist alongside connection. Meanwhile, Amelia was experiencing her own transformation. For 5 years, she'd convinced herself that being invisible was her permanent state, her defining characteristic, the thing that made her fundamentally different from everyone else in that glittering world. But with each dance, each moment Spencer chose to stay when he could have left, that belief started to crack. Not because he was rescuing her or saving her or completing her, none of that fairy tale nonsense, but because he was seeing her, consistently and intentionally seeing her, and that visibility reminded her of something she'd forgotten. She'd always been worth seeing. The problem was never her. The problem was that she'd been dancing in the wrong ballrooms with the wrong people who were looking for the wrong things. By the time they finally stopped dancing, the night had grown late, and the crowd had thinned considerably. Spencer had broken every rule he'd set for himself, every carefully constructed boundary that had kept him safe for years. And instead of feeling panicked or exposed or regretful, he felt something he barely recognized: hope. Amelia, standing there slightly breathless with her hand still in his, felt it too. That forbidden possibility that maybe, just maybe, invisibility wasn't her destiny after all. That maybe she'd been preserved through all those years of being overlooked so she could be available for this moment, this person, this connection that wouldn't have been possible if she'd compromised herself trying to be someone else. And as they finally parted ways that night, both of them carried the same secret knowledge. Something had shifted. Something had changed. And there was no going back to who they were before that first dance. Let's talk about the first major lesson here, and this one's gonna flip your perspective completely. Invisibility isn't a flaw, it's a filter. For 5 long years, Amelia thought being ignored was her curse, her punishment, proof that something was fundamentally wrong with her. But here's the secret nobody tells you. She was actually being protected. Every man who overlooked her, every potential suitor who passed her by, every dance card that stayed empty, was the universe filtering out people who would have wasted her time, drained her energy, or worse, convinced her to become someone she wasn't just to be noticed. She was being saved from the wrong matches so she'd be available, emotionally and mentally, when the right person finally appeared. That's not poetry. That's practical wisdom. Think about it like this, and I want you to really sit with this example because it'll change how you see rejection. How many times have you been devastated by not getting that job you wanted? You prepared, you interviewed well, you were perfect for it, and then nothing. Rejection. And it crushed you. But then months later, you discover the company went bankrupt, or the boss was a nightmare, or the whole department got laid off. Suddenly that rejection looks different, doesn't it? It wasn't punishment, it was protection. The same principle applies to relationships, friendships, opportunities. Sometimes you don't get what you want because life is steering you away from what would have hurt you. Amelia's invisibility was her shield against settling for less than she deserved. Second lesson, and this one's uncomfortable but crucial. The right people see you at your worst, not your best. Spencer didn't meet Amelia when she was confident, radiant, and full of hope. He found her tired, resigned, sitting in a corner with no expectations left. She wasn't wearing her best dress or her brightest smile. She'd given up trying to be impressive. And that's exactly what drew him in. Because it was real. Because he was tired too. Broken too. Done with performances too. See, we spend so much energy trying to present our best selves to the world, waiting until we're ready to be loved. But the conspiracy here is that authentic connection happens when you stop performing and start existing. Here's something practical you can implement right now, today, in your actual life. Stop waiting to be perfect before you let people see you. Stop thinking you need the perfect body, the perfect career, the perfect life before you deserve love or friendship or recognition. The people who are meant for you, the ones who will actually stick around when things get hard, they're gonna love you in your messy, imperfect, struggling version. Actually, they'll love you especially in that version because that's when you're most human, most relatable, most real. I'm not saying don't work on yourself or don't have goals. I'm saying stop hiding until you achieve them. Let people see the journey, not just the highlight reel. That's where genuine connection lives. Third lesson hits different, and it's about quality over quantity. One real connection beats 1,000 superficial admirers every single time. Amelia could have had dozens of suitors if she'd played the game differently. If she'd flirted more aggressively, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, pretended to be interested in boring conversations, molded herself into what society expected. But then she would have attracted men who loved the performance, not the person. Men who would have disappeared the moment she got tired of acting. Instead, by refusing to compromise her authenticity, even when it meant years of loneliness, she attracted the one person who could actually see her. Quality always trumps quantity when it comes to human connection. Let me get personal for a second because this lesson almost broke me before I learned it. I spent years, literal years, trying to be everything to everyone. The funny guy at work, the cool friend at parties, the impressive date who always had interesting stories. And you know what? I was exhausted, completely drained, and empty because none of those connections felt real. They loved my performance, not my person. It wasn't until I stopped performing, stopped trying to be universally liked, that I found the few people who actually got me, who loved me quiet, tired, anxious, imperfect. And here's the revelation. Those few people gave me more genuine happiness than crowds of admirers ever did. You don't need everyone to see you. You need the right ones to understand you. The fourth lesson is about timing. And this one requires patience you might not want to hear about. Amelia's story wasn't about instant gratification or quick fixes. She waited 5 years. 5 years. That's 60 months of showing up, being overlooked, going home disappointed. Most people would have given up, would have either compromised who they were to get attention or stopped showing up altogether. But she kept going, kept existing in her truth, even when that truth was painful and lonely. And that persistence, that refusal to either perform or disappear, created the space for something real to eventually happen. Good things don't come to those who wait. They come to those who wait while staying true to themselves. Here's a practical framework you can use. Start measuring your worth by internal metrics instead of external validation. Instead of counting how many people notice you, ask yourself if you're being authentic. Instead of tracking how many opportunities you get, evaluate whether those opportunities align with who you actually are. Instead of worrying about being seen by everyone, focus on being genuine for yourself. Because here's the secret code that Amelia cracked without realizing it. When you stop performing for an audience, you become magnetic to the people who matter. Authenticity has its own frequency, and it attracts people who vibrate at that same level. The crowd might not get it, but the right person will recognize it immediately. And here's the final piece that ties everything together. Your story isn't over just because you feel invisible right now. Amelia spent 5 years thinking she knew how her story would end. Alone, overlooked, forgotten. She'd written herself off, accepted her fate, made peace with a small, invisible life. And then, one night, one moment, one person changed the entire trajectory. That's not meant to make you wait passively for magic to happen. It's meant to remind you that you never know what tomorrow holds. Keep showing up. Keep being real. Keep refusing to compromise who you are for temporary validation. Because somewhere out there, someone's looking for exactly what you are, not what you pretend to be. And when they find you, when you find each other, all those years of waiting will suddenly make sense in ways you never expected. Maybe you're watching this right now and thinking, that's me. That's literally my life. You show up to places and nobody notices you're there. You speak and people talk over you like you didn't say anything. You try so hard, put in all this effort, and it's like the world just doesn't care. You're living your own version of those 5 years, sitting in your own corner of the ballroom, watching everyone else get chosen while you remain invisible. And I see you. I really do. Because I've been there too, in different ways, feeling like a ghost in my own life. So let me talk directly to you for a moment, because this part matters more than anything else I'm gonna say. Here's the truth, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, because you deserve honesty, not empty comfort. Being invisible hurts. It's a specific kind of pain that's hard to explain to people who've never experienced it. It's not dramatic or obvious. It's this constant, low-grade ache of feeling like you don't matter, like you could disappear tomorrow and nobody would notice. It's rejection without anyone actively rejecting you, loneliness in crowded rooms, the exhausting effort of existing without being acknowledged. And there's no magic formula to make it stop overnight, no secret code you can crack that'll suddenly make everyone see you. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you a fantasy. The pain is real, and pretending it doesn't help anyone. But here's where hope enters the story, and I need you to really hear this part. Amelia's story isn't about transformation from invisible to visible, from overlooked to celebrated, from nobody to somebody. That's not what happened. What happened was this. She discovered she'd always been valuable, even when nobody was looking. Her worth wasn't created the moment Spencer noticed her. It existed all along, constant and unchanging, independent of external validation. The revelation wasn't that she became worthy of being seen. The revelation was that being seen or unseen had nothing to do with her actual value. She was always enough. The problem was never her. The problem was she'd been showing up in spaces where people were looking for the wrong things. Let me hit you with a perspective shift that changed my entire life. What if your current invisibility isn't a failure, but an act of rebellion? Think about it. In a world that demands you perform, pretend, and prostitute yourself for attention, you're refusing to play that game. You're not dancing like a trained monkey for likes and validation. You're not compromising who you are to fit someone else's expectations. You're not selling pieces of your soul for temporary recognition. That's not weakness, friend. That's integrity. That's you saying, I'd rather be invisible as myself than visible as someone I'm not. And that takes more courage than most people will ever have. Your invisibility might be preserving your dignity, while everyone else is auctioning theirs off. Here's another angle that'll mess with your head in a good way. Every ballroom where you weren't invited to dance? Every opportunity where you were overlooked? Every relationship that didn't happen? What if those weren't rejections but protections? What if you were being saved from wasting years with the wrong people, in the wrong places, building the wrong life? I'm not saying everything happens for a reason in some cosmic destiny sense, but I am saying that sometimes not getting what you thought you wanted is the universe's way of keeping you available for something better. Something that actually aligns with who you are instead of who you're pretending to be. The silence of those empty dance cards might be making space for the right song. Now, let's get practical, because philosophy without action is just pretty words. Here's what you can actually do, starting today. First, stop trying to be seen by everyone. That's an exhausting, impossible goal that'll drain your soul. Instead, focus on being authentic to yourself. Second, stop going to ballrooms that make you feel small, literally and metaphorically. If there are places, people, or situations that consistently make you feel invisible and worthless, stop showing up there. Find your own spaces, create your own communities, seek out environments where your kind of energy is valued. Third, and this is crucial, stop measuring your value by the attention you receive. Start measuring it by the peace you feel. Would you rather be celebrated by people who don't know you or understood by a few who do? Here's a tactical example you can implement right now. Let's say you're always the person at work whose ideas get ignored in meetings. You contribute thoughtfully, but somehow your suggestions only get heard when someone else repeats them louder. That's your version of being a wallflower at the ball. So what do? Option 1. Start performing more aggressively. Talk louder. Interrupt more. Play office politics. That might get you noticed, but at what cost? You become someone you don't recognize. Option 2. Stop waiting for meeting validation. Document your ideas, build your projects, create tangible results that speak for themselves. Find the people who do see your value and collaborate with them. Sometimes the solution isn't making yourself visible to everyone. It's finding the right audience for who you actually are. And here's the promise I can make you, based not on fairy tales, but on real human patterns I've observed over decades. One day, someone's gonna cross the room for you. Not the whole room, not the crowd, but the right person. Someone who sees past the performance everyone else is doing and recognizes something real in you. Someone who's also tired of games and masks and social codes, and when that happens, you'll understand why nothing worked out before. You'll see that all those years of being overlooked were filtering out people who would have loved a version of you that didn't exist. You were being preserved, kept whole and authentic, so you'd be ready when the real connection finally arrived. Not because you were found, but because you never lost yourself trying to be seen. The most important thing, and I really need you to absorb this, is that you don't wait passively for this to happen. You don't sit in your corner hoping for magic. You live your life fully, authentically, courageously, even in your invisibility. You read the books you want to read, pursue the interests that fascinate you, build the life that feels true to who you are, regardless of whether anyone's watching or applauding. Because here's the real secret. When you stop performing for an audience and start living for yourself, you become genuinely interesting. You develop depth, wisdom, authentic experiences that make you magnetic to the right people. Amelia didn't attract Spencer by trying to be attractive. She attracted him by being so completely herself that she couldn't be ignored by someone looking for real. That's the kind of visibility worth having. That's the kind of connection worth waiting for. And that's the kind of life worth building, even if you build it alone first. So, here we are, at the end of Amelia and Spencer's story. But really, we're at the beginning of yours. Because everything I just shared with you, every lesson, every revelation, every secret about invisibility and connection, it only matters if you actually do something with it. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. And I didn't spend all this time unpacking this fictional tale just to entertain you. I did it to wake you up to possibilities you might have stopped believing in. So let me ask you something real. What are you going to do differently tomorrow? Are you going to keep showing up to ballrooms that make you feel small? Are you going to keep performing for people who'll never really see you? Or are you ready to try something radically different? Here's what I want you to think about. Seriously think about. Not just nod along and forget in 5 minutes. How much of your life are you spending trying to be visible to people who don't matter? How many hours have you wasted crafting the perfect image, saying the right things, being who you think others want you to be? And what has that gotten you? More importantly, what has it cost you? Because here's the conspiracy nobody's talking about. Every minute you spend performing for the wrong audience is a minute you're not available for the right connection. Every compromise you make to be seen by people who don't value authenticity is a betrayal of the person who's waiting to meet the real you. Amelia's 5 years of invisibility weren't punishment. They were preparation. What if yours are too? Let me get provocative for a second, because comfortable questions don't create change. Are you brave enough to stop performing? Are you courageous enough to be invisible to the masses so you can be visible to the few who matter? Are you strong enough to sit in that corner, metaphorically speaking, and refuse to dance until someone asks for the real you, not the performance? Most people aren't. Most people will compromise, perform, and pretend their entire lives because the fear of being alone is stronger than the desire to be authentic. But you're still here, still listening, which means you might be different. The question is, are you ready to prove it? Here's your homework, and I'm dead serious about this. First, identify one place in your life where you're performing for validation you don't actually want. Maybe it's a friendship that drains you, a job that requires you to be someone you're not, a social media presence that feels exhausting to maintain. Name it. Write it down. Second, decide what authentic looks like for you in that area. What would you do, say, or be if nobody was watching and judging? Third, take one small step toward that authenticity this week. Just one. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be real. Because transformation doesn't happen in giant leaps. It happens in honest steps. Amelia didn't suddenly become confident. She just stopped pretending she was something she wasn't. That's all you need to start with. Now here's the part where I'm going to challenge you directly. And you can get mad at me if you want, but I'm saying it anyway. If you're still waiting for permission to be yourself, you're going to be waiting forever. If you're still hoping that one day you'll be perfect enough, successful enough, confident enough to deserve real connection, you've already lost. Because that day doesn't exist. The right people don't want your perfection. They want your truth. And the longer you wait to show them that truth, the longer you stay invisible to the connections that could actually change your life. So stop waiting. Stop preparing. Stop rehearsing the person you think you need to be. Just start being who you are, even if it's messy, even if it's broken, even if it's tired and resigned and done with performing. That's where connection lives. What would your life look like if you stopped caring about being seen by everyone and started focusing on being understood by someone? What would change if you measured your worth by your authenticity instead of your popularity? What doors might open if you had the courage to close the ones leading to places that diminish you? These aren't rhetorical questions, friend. I genuinely want you to answer them. Sit with them. Journal about them. talk about them with someone you trust. Because these questions hold the codes to unlocking a life that actually feels like yours, not a performance you're giving for an audience that doesn't even appreciate the show. And look, I know some of you are thinking, this is easy to say but hard to do, and you're absolutely right. It is hard. Being authentic in a world that rewards performance is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. You will lose people. You will miss opportunities. You will have moments of doubt where you wonder if you're making a huge mistake. But here's what I know from experience, from watching this pattern play out in countless lives, including my own. The people you lose by being authentic were never really yours to begin with. The opportunities you miss by refusing to compromise weren't aligned with who you actually are. And the doubt you feel is just your old programming fighting against your evolution. Push through it. The other side is worth it. So here's my final challenge to you, and then I'll let you go do the work. For the next 30 days, I want you to conduct an experiment. Stop trying to be impressive and start being real. Stop curating your image and start sharing your truth. Stop performing confidence you don't feel and start admitting when you're struggling. See what happens. See who shows up. See who disappears. See how it feels to live in your actual skin instead of a costume you've been wearing to fit in. And then, 30 days from now, come back and tell me what you discovered. Tell me who you met. Tell me what changed. Because I promise you, something will. When you stop being invisible by performing and start being visible by being real, the right people will find you. Just like Spencer found Amelia. Just like your person will find you. Now, if this story resonated with you, if these lessons hit home, if you're ready to stop being invisible to yourself and the world, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because we're just getting started exploring these uncomfortable truths about connection, authenticity, and human behavior. Every week, I'm breaking down stories like this one, uncovering the hidden patterns that explain why your life looks the way it does and what you can do about it. This isn't surface-level content. This is the deep stuff, the real stuff, the forbidden knowledge that actually creates change. And if you're tired of being invisible, tired of performing, tired of waiting for permission to be yourself, then you need to be here for what's coming next. Your transformation doesn't end with this video. It starts here. So subscribe, turn on those notifications, and let's keep uncovering the revelations that set you free. I'll see you in the next one, and I can't wait to hear how your experiment goes. Now go be authentically, unapologetically, courageously you. The right people are waiting.